one screen. I just don't know.
I know. I understand what you're saying to make it
When my husband's gone, sometimes I'll use the station. He only has one screen, so I have like a laptop screen. So annoying. How do people live on that? I have to do so many demos and I record them all, so yeah. I don't know if this is.
And then there's water for you, honey, if you need it. And you just start at 1. You need to introduce you ready.
No, we could do that.
Yeah.
Unless you really want to.
I love you, but I'll let you do that. Or Jessica, I think I just said, okay, Jessica, your turn for the first time. So I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I have introductions built into my slides.
Yeah,
so
you
you're good.
Yeah, you All right. And we'll be ready, Mike and I'll be ready for questions.
So they say you're the list.
So if we like you're dominating it, or you're just hard like that.
I just double checked all the notes.
So are you okay if I start?
Yeah.
I know you had a lot of fun.
The guys from Canada slept. I'm trying to make this more engaging, but everybody else is
You were very engaging.
okay.
And I've heard all the things so far. And I still find it. I was yes anding you all the time.
I figured people would be interested in Gen Ed redesign. Knowing Shay gets people fired up.
Yeah, my room is like, we want controversy. Because it's all advising. Category. And I tried to explain that in this poem. You just have to that's 30 credits. That other stuff, that could be a graduation requirement. And then you have 30 credits and you have all this room. She was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, someone just suggested, I was like, could we just have the bottom area as
I'm not a makeup. I'm to be not foundations because 40 credit foundations is going to get in trouble.
they didn't even
Like that.
15 cents.
It might be a little different when you get all the people, all the employees.
Well, especially since there was not a faculty.
Another one that I was in was very lively and fruitful, and hopefully all the notes that were taken will be helpful for Terry and the group to put together and get a good idea of what's going on across the 3 institutions as far as transfer goes. So Jessica and I are also here representing another person who wasn't able to come, and the title of our session is Recognition of Learning, Promising Practices to Support Transfer Student Success. Cassandra is a member of our team. Oh, I have to click. So many pieces. I'm really used to doing this online, so forward. Cassandra Levesque is the other team member of mine. We're a two-person team, and we support the technologies. She's been with the system for quite a while and with the system office since 2017. You can read the slide. We are sad that she's not here because she really gives another perspective. Do you want to introduce yourself? Or?
All right, so for anyone who wasn't here this morning, my name is Jessica Migler. My pronouns are she, her. I am the director for transfer at the system office, so I'm really on the policy and procedure side of things, and I'm happy to be here.
And my name is Kelly Pontawatran because that's really easy to say. My full title is also easy to say. It's Student Success and Planning Technology Support Analyst. We wanted something that was immediately, you would understand what the job was if you heard the title, and so there you go. We support the technology. We're the functional technology support people. I have been with the system for a really long time, 1998, 97 probably is really more true. I was an intern at Metro State right at the beginning when everything was being formed, and there was still what people said was blood in the water, which sounded really graphic. But for someone who was a first-generation student, it seemed like the promise of a wonderful world. You could go one place, start there, and continue on until you got your master's degree, all within the same system, in a seamless way. Yep, we're still working on that. Okay, so I joined the system office in 2019. But before that, I was a career counselor, admissions representative, counselor, transfer specialist, and most recently, an academic advisor with 1,700 students. That seems doable. So when you hear academic advisors say, we need more staff, it's true. I mean, the numbers that you want to get at are about 250, 350. However, we also can do things a little bit differently so that advisors aren't the only ones teaching about advising type things, teaching how to be a student. That's everybody's work. So we're going to do an icebreaker here. Everybody just had lunch. We don't want you to fall asleep right away, so we got to get you thinking there. Think of a student or students you've encountered, worked with, who've had previous learning from different sources. As you know, we have, oh shoot, I keep forgetting. Jeez. Students you've encountered or worked with who had previous learning from different sources. Military, workplace, other colleges, national exams, that's like AP, IB, those kinds of things, CLEP. How do you think that student would describe their transfer experience? What was helpful about the process and the outcome? What was frustrating about the process and the outcome? And you can just talk to the people on your table or just think about it. My notes went away. Okay. All right, now keep those things in mind as you listen to the rest of our presentation here. We really try to center the student and the learning. So learners, learning, we'll use those things interchangeably. You'll also see me say school, and that's inclusive of colleges, universities, as well as our P20 partners. So everything, Learning Place is a school. I'm not trying to count anybody out, I'm trying to bring everybody in, and it's easier than saying P20 colleges, universities. Recognition of learning, we're going to do a brief overview of the history of Minnesota State. Some of you are new, some of you have been here a long time. But even those of us that have been here a long time might not be aware of the history as far as the transfer and where our stance is on that and the technologies that we have available. We're going to look at transfer and equity, data, some course transfer procedures, apply your knowledge about transfer, course equivalencies, and the Minnesota transfer curriculum, course outlines, and syllabi. So the things that we're covering is a combination of the things that we've presented in other places, and then the list of things that Terry and the committee let us know that you really were interested in hearing about. It's a lot of stuff. Usually this would be probably 5 or 10 mini sessions. So realize that this isn't the first and last time you'll hear this information. We have regular webinars and things like that all throughout the academic year. And you can also reach out to us if you have questions about any of these things. So recognition of learning, brief history of Minnesota State. Back in the 80s, it started being talked about, like, why do we have all these things happening in one state when we could do it together? So at that time, we had 62 independent state institutions, 21 community colleges. Some of them were called teachers' colleges, and AVTIs. If anybody's as old as I am, you might remember those. And then state universities. In 1985, the state of Minnesota started offering early college credit. So I was in one of those school districts when we were offered PSEO. I lived in Inver Grove Heights. Inver Hills was right there. We were one of the test pilot high schools. I did not take those classes because I said, I'm in high school. I can take all the really fun classes now. I'll do college in college. That's kind of my background. I was first generation, so that was sort of how I looked at it. 1985 to 91 was the introduction of merging the systems into one. What happened was they were really recognizing student mobility. People weren't starting in one place and completing what they started at that place. They also needed to connect K-12 to higher ed. I heard these conversations going on lots of places today. The reason I bring the history here is because these conversations have been happening since the beginning, and we're still having them. I'm hoping that the next step will be, we had these conversations and we connected the dots so that we don't have to have as many of these all the time. However, it will be ongoing conversation to making sure that we're making this work for learners in the state of Minnesota. And then adding the skills-based credit transfer option. So CTE, Articulated College Credits, that's a whole nother ball of wax. If any of you are interested, talk to your college partners. They can tell you about it. All right, centering students. From the very beginning, the idea of Minnesota State was to center the learner and their mobility and make it easier for people who live in the state of Minnesota to go from one place to another place. So improving student transfer was one of the goals. There were other goals, but that's the one I'm going to focus on. From 1997 to 2000, the very first strategic plan that the system had was called Putting Students First. It's still on minstate.edu. You can look at it, you can read it. We could just copy that over and do it again, right? So, 1997, there wasn't a system, a computer system that did what we needed it to do. We had standalone technical colleges that had been attached to the high school system. We had community colleges that were their own thing and universities that were all their own thing. How do we have one system that works for that? So we built it. That's our homegrown SIS, that's called ISRS, that we still have now. It was never meant to live this long. We just haven't been able to find something that worked for it. For those of you that know anything about computers, it's built on COBOL. If you don't know what that language is, yep, that's why. Okay, so, and if you've been here a long time, you know that about every 10 years we had a, can we replace ISRS conversation with like a poster board and sticky note convention. So we're finally doing it. It's called Workday Student. Get involved when you're asked, because we want you to help form that. 2003, implementing degree audit. So I worked at Century College. After the degree audit, left Century College to go to the system office. So the person who started that at Century, system office noticed and said, hey, we'd like that for the entire system. But when she left, she took the computer there and there was nobody there. So when I started at Century, I did it by hand. So we had electronic degree audits, but there was only one person with that. So when you think about this and you think about legacies and knowledge and how it can leave with a person, try to prevent that in your current situation, because it was not great. People who work at Century now will still see equivalency Word documents that I created with my signature on them. So I did hand calculation of graduation. That's super fun. And then looking at requirements, I was a counselor, so it was faculty that did, I was non-teaching faculty counselor, and we did all the equivalencies. But what I noticed when I was doing equivalencies is that one year somebody said this from this school was this, and one year somebody said that from that school was something else. So the degree audit regularizes that. That's what equivalencies are. So that if your friend took a class at Riverland 5 years ago, that class hasn't changed, the equivalent class hasn't changed at Mankato, it doesn't matter who looks at it, that course is equivalent. That was not happening before, and sometimes it's not happening now, depending on the course. So we implemented that beginning in 2003, and it was fully implemented in 2008. We also started implementing the course applicability, not easy to say, system, or CAS, which was USelect and is now Transferology. This was also something that we did with the University of Minnesota system. So the idea was that anybody at a public institution in the state of Minnesota would have the same technologies and would have the same experience. It's still sort of similar. They still use the same degree audit system that we do, and they still use Transferology and tests. So there's some similarities, but some of those other things stopped happening. Student mobility. So when we talk about this, what I want you to know is that we want all the classes that you offer to be full. We do. We don't want students to take a course they've already taken. We want them to get credit for the learning that they've had. So how do you square those two things? Well, that's when we talk about students in Minnesota State and mobility. When we look at students as all of our students and we center the processes and the learning, it's really easy to see where some of those difficulties are and where the places are that we can smooth out. So one of the things, we know that students take courses at multiple schools. That's just a fact. It's been a fact for a very long time, even before 2003. When you think about students taking classes at multiple schools, do you think that they're just doing that because it makes their lives easier? Or do you think it's easier to take all their classes at one institution? So when you think, well, it's probably easier for them to take all their classes at one institution, why do you think that they take courses at multiple places? And this is just to think amongst yourselves. What needs might they have that makes it difficult for them to take all their courses at one school? Does your school do both departmental scheduling and cross-departmental scheduling? So where I worked, a lot of times the department would work with all the people who taught in their department, but they never talked to the other departments. And I don't know, but most of the students I advised took classes at 5 to 6 different departments, not just at one department. So having those cross-departmental conversations can really help. And a lot of times, if you have a program and you know what they take the next semester, those would be the people that you wanted to talk to make sure that a student could actually do that. If you have students that go to work, could they get all their courses in the morning? Could they get all their courses in the evening? Could they get all their courses in the midday? Those are the kinds of things that we think would help with you thinking about student mobility. One of the things that we know is that most of the people in Minnesota State who seek higher education come to Minnesota State. But they come for lots of different reasons, right? Some people come because they have money from serving in the services. Some people come because they took classes in high school and that's how it was offered. We don't really know how they start taking classes necessarily because it might not be at one of our doors specifically, even if it's one of our credits. But they are all our students and we serve more students than anybody else. There's a lot of information on Minnesota OHE, and it's not super transparent, I don't think, and it doesn't always speak to our students. But this is a general slide. Jessica will talk a lot more about statistics and data. But if you look at students who are undergraduate enrollees, and these are not going to be students that are counted as PSU and such, this is just undergraduates enrolled. Most of them are our two-year schools. So if we're going to be serving our students, we really need to have those partnerships more activated. And you can see that a lot of our students are taking part-time classes. So if we're only building programs that are working for no credits, first-time student, full-time, we're not building programs that work for most of our students. Do we need programs that do that? Yes, because that is some of our population as well. But we also have students that can only take one class class per semester. So when we have these statistics in our group, we talked a lot about how we might not be measuring our actual students. So at the 2-year schools, if you have a student who's only taking 1 or 2 classes per semester because they're working and they have a full life, they might not finish their intended program for 4 years, but we're counting them at 3 years. So they're not showing, but we're still retaining them. And so there's a lot of things that we could be measuring as a system that maybe the external measurements aren't counting, but we could know it as a system. Because I think that we have a huge retention rate if you look at students in that way, but we don't. So I'm just guessing based on what I see with our students. Oh, and I should say, you can ask questions whenever. They'll come around with microphones. We're used to being interrupted because we tend to talk a lot. Sorry. These are not my words. This was from a thing that I found on the CCRC, which is Community College Resource Center at Columbia. Yeah, that Columbia. Okay, so don't blame students for institutional barriers to equitable transfer student success. This was by somebody, and I think it's really powerful. 6 years after I transitioned from working at University One to one with community college transfer students to researching transfer outcomes and reforms, 2 things have remained constant. Lots of hard work is going on to supporting transfer students, and yet only fraction entering community college students realize their goal of completing a bachelor's degree. Okay, we all know that. The rest of this, this talk that we're giving is kind of addressing that problem. I'll leave that slide for you all to read at another time and keep going here. So degree audit implementation and usage. In 2008, all the colleges and universities had the degree audit, but it's been used in various ways across. The idea was, well, we've rolled it out, now advisors will use this and students will know what they need to do. That's not what happened, just so you know. So it's really widely used in the registrar's office to confer graduation, but having it being used by advisors varied a lot across the state. When I started implementing Graduation Planner and Schedule Builder, I knew that was true, but I was kind of surprised at how true it really was. Graduation Planners helped get degree audit to be more used. In 2007, I found this document. You might find it interesting. There was an audit, an internal audit to see about student success measures and systems, and at that time, we were doing a pretty good job. It says kind of the same things we have now. So if you look at the way things are measured, we do a really good job with transfer. But we all have stories of students that they didn't feel like we did such a good job. Even on the stage, you heard a student who thought it was really seamless. Another student said, well, sorta. And so those are the things that I think having that collaboration in your region, we know that a lot of students are tied by geography. Having those conversations so that they can move to and from is going to be successful for all of us. We also know that some of the ways that we are funded does not encourage that work, though I think in the long run, if we look at long-term outcomes like retention, success, and completion, that work really does give you more benefit in the end. Okay, 2007, internal audit, 2009, e-transcripts are system institutions. So I don't know if those of you who don't work with this know this, but if you're a student at Minnesota State and you transfer to another Minnesota State institution, that other institution can pull your transcript electronically. You don't have to pay for it, you just have to tell them usually that it's there. If they went somewhere else, they have to pay for all those transcripts for us to send them somewhere else. So one of the benefits of staying within Minnesota State is it doesn't cost you money to move your transcript information to and from. But it's still a thing that we have to do and load that information in there. At that time, training was focused on the degree audit users. It was called DARS then, so I have to say that because that's what it was. And so in program encoders and transfer specialists who do the transfer course and coding. It was used widely for processing transfer, previous learning, graduation checks, and award conferral, but advising, not as much consistency. From 2009 to 2012, enrollment was strong and continued to grow yearly. Additional opportunities for alignment standardization were explored and implemented. People across the system got together regularly on a yearly basis. Departments met in the summer and aligned a lot of their information and course information across colleges and universities are the same. So you would have a business group, an accounting group, a biology group that would get together and align some of that stuff. Greg can tell you about it. the goal was to really reduce barriers and take courses at any of the system colleges. So now when you're a student, you can go into the registration, you can look for equivalencies and take a course somewhere else with not very much difficulty doing that on that end, but then on the other end, there's some difficulty that is invisible. So the system office continued to provide training for those people who did that and guidance for transfer specialists. Again, not so much in the advising, that was just thought that would just happen. System office hosted faculty convenings by academic department. Internal audits and reports kept going and focused on improvement and alignment. There was a report that came out every year that had all the courses, all the colleges and universities listed and how many credits and percentage of students have credits coming in and all that. And it was a really great resource. We don't collect or put that information out anymore. Some of that's available in the legislative thing, but that was really helpful. So you could see how many transfer students are at each institution, and some institutions have like 90% transfer. So it's a very different thing than some that have 30% transfer. And it really helped with people understanding the differences between our institutions. And then in 2012, we had a grant to do reverse transfer. Jessica does reverse transfer now. She can talk about that if she wants. But so if we look at those dates that I talked about, increased alignment standardization, it really aligns up with this graph that shows enrollment going up. And then at a time when enrollment is going down, there are some other changes that we saw as well. So between 2008 and 2010, we would have training at the system office for employees and at the individual campus on ISRS and on Darwin at that time. Lots of name changes. And then we had an annual users conference. So we had an encoder conference and we had a transfer specialist conference. That was the last day of the conference with some people that were overlaps. We used to have regional and centrally located training that people could request. And we began doing monthly webinars in 2019. What began to change in 2012? Leadership changes, institution and system level. We also saw that shift from uniqueness and from alignment to uniqueness and individualization. It coincides with that decrease in enrollment. So you can see when people are changing enrollment, ideas change about what's needed and what will help students. Because of the way that we're funded, that is also exacerbated because we look at full-time equivalent rather than head count. System office helps solve problems and issues, but we don't do as much of the alignment, reporting out aligning, reporting and just suggesting how to align. We really are here to support the technologies. So that's a lot of the things that have changed. The office that I'm in now used to have 9 people and it has 2. Jessica's department used to have 4, I think, and now 1. So you can see that we can't do a lot of the things that we used to do. I heard somebody say it would be great if system office could do some looking around and telling people what they could do to align better. That's not our role right now. Our role is to inform and to support the questions that you have. So the types of previous learning that we have in our policies right now, they're separated out. But if you think about this learning comes in a human, right? So they're not seeing it as different things. They're like, I have these kinds of learning, tell me what it does toward the program I want to do. But they do have separate policies. So we have transfer credits, and that is often given in the state of Minnesota at the high school level. We also have CPL external assessments. Those are things that are like AP, IB, CLEP, that kind of stuff. And then internal assessments, which is up to the individual institution and is faculty led. This is a diagram that you probably can't see, but we do have a theory of everything when it comes to recognition of learning. In that far left purple column is the type of learning, and those are the 3 buckets that I just described. In the middle is workflow, and until we had tests, that was all over the place. Some people used tests, some people used email. I personally had to deliver packets to faculty to do things which may or may not have come back with equivalencies or come back at all. And so with all these differences, having that be aligned is going to be real helpful. And then it all ends up being on the transcript and in the degree audit. Are there any questions before Jessica continues? Go ahead, Abby.
Sure. Is Grad Planner or Student Planner going to continue once Workday is implemented?
That's a good question. Workday Student is a long project. We don't know what it's going to end up with. We're going with the Workday first posture. Between now and then, we have hundreds of thousands of students to serve, and our UAchieve contract goes until 2031, I think. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, we have a contract. I think it goes to 2028 and renewable to 2031 if needed. So we're not going to be left high and dry. And a lot of times you have to run both systems at the same time to graduate out the students that are already in that you wouldn't move over. There's going to be a lot of metrics around that and how that's going to happen. It'll be a whole process. But in the meantime, the more that we can use the products that we have now, the better informed we will be what we need Workday to do.
Considering we'll keep using UAchieve and Grad Planner for some things, is it possible to open up Schedule Builder and in Grad Planner when you see previous semesters a course was offered so that it doesn't stop at the current semester we're in? And the reason I ask this as we talk about scheduling between departments, oftentimes on campuses, it's up to an advisor to remember how often a course is offered. And sometimes the advisor's new or sometimes things are changing, but if we can see what the trend has been in the last few years, that could help a student determine it's likely that this class may be offered in the fall.
What I would recommend is that you work with faculty and have them fill in that offering frequency fill that they can do in curriculum.
So it's not a system-wide thing?
We have to allow 3 terms to be seen, and so that's what we have. It's not going to go back in time, it's meant to go forward. But in curriculum, there is a field that says what offering frequency is, and I would recommend using that. So if it's always offered every spring, it could say every spring.
Thank you. Related to that, can we just get rid of that part at the bottom and just have people put in the offering frequency? Because it's very confusing to students when they see all those X's and question marks and everything out there. So it'd be better to not have it.
Not the experience with everybody. If you use a lot of people, maybe in the students that you, but I have a lot more people that I work with, and they work together. They're 2 different sources of information out of curriculum. One is what's on the schedule right now, and one is what had we planned to do. So offering frequency is, this is the cadence with which we hope to always offer this course. And then the bottom one is, this is what has rolled to be on the schedule. And so you can make changes. So if you have a fall offering only even years, but for some reason you had a need and you offered it then, the student could say, oh, but it is now. So it's 2 different sources of information.
So because it's all colored, that's what jumps out. The other is just black text and it's kind of blends in there. So it draws, naturally we are drawn to that color, and that's what students are looking at. So we find that it's very confusing to students, and they're trying to look at that, and they're not seeing the other text, and maybe it's just black and white. Even putting it in color, bolding it, something might be helpful.
Anybody else? And and to Linda's point, the version that we're on right now is not, this is the current version that we're on right now. There's newer versions that we are not migrating to because we're in the middle of a freeze and we're working on Workday Student. So if we moved forward with UAchieve, it wouldn't be the version we're on. And a lot of those concerns that Linda has are very different in the newer version. It's like a complete rewrite of UAchieve. So a lot of the things you're wondering about have been addressed in the newer version. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So I get the privilege, now that Kelly has kind of set the stage for everything, we kind of know the history, we know where we're at, and so what we're gonna talk about next is, so you'll see transfer student success is an equity issue. I often say transfer is an equity issue. It's the students that we serve, it's our Equity 2030 populations, and so we'll do a deep dive into that. Now, before I say go on with the rest of this, my focus is academic affairs, because that's the unit that I'm in. Not a lot of this today is going to talk about student sense of belonging, onboarding students, We did a focus groups and surveys a few years ago now, and the number one factor of students in our focus groups that indicated that they would continue was that there was one person, even just one person on campus that cared about them and wanted them to succeed. And so that could be the person at the registration window, that could be an advisor, that could be a custodian that welcomes you to campus every day. So these are not things that we can quantify, right? Like I can't give you data about this, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention these things before going on to talk about the academic affairs part. And transfer receptive culture is unique to each one of our institutions, but I think a lot of this academic affairs work is the backbone to creating a transfer receptive culture. And then the next step is first we show them that they're welcome by accepting their credits, and then we show them that they're welcome by introducing them to campus, by making them feel welcome, by giving them those next steps that are really the purview of our amazing student affairs people. So I just wanted to say that because people have said, well, transfer success is a lot about like retention and making students feel welcome. And that's kind of the next step. Hopefully we can start systemizing that in the next few years. But first we're gonna talk about some of our academic affairs information. So the issue that we're faced with transfer student success, and we'll go a little bit deeper into the Minnesota state data versus national data, but only about 16% of students entering community college in fall 2015 completed a bachelor's degree within 6 years. And over 80% of those students said that their goal was to complete a bachelor's degree. So when we're looking at those numbers, we're recognizing nationwide, we are not, our transfer students are not succeeding. And I would say this is on me too. I'm in charge of transfer. We are not succeeding as a system if these students are not succeeding. So it's not just about completion, it's about equity. So one of the reasons that we focus on transfer is because transfer disproportionately affects our most vulnerable student populations. Our transfer students are largely low-income students, they're largely first-generation students, they're largely our students of color, students that are historically marginalized by our higher education systems. And I'll pass this on. I know this is a little bit going out there, but I was talking about transfer one day to somebody in a group that we were trying to do a project together, and she said, have you ever realized that our transfer process is what we would define as bureaucratic violence? Now, as somebody who is in charge of transfer, this is not something that generally is a positive thing you want to hear, right? So I had to look it up, and I had to ask myself really truthfully, does this describe our transfer system? So bureaucratic violence, as described by Jonathan Weinberg in the Michigan Law Review, is harm and suffering inflicted through the action or inaction of bureaucratic systems, often characterized by rigid procedures, lack of accountability, and the reduction of individuals to mere files rather than a human being. So I had to ask myself, is that how our transfer systems treats our students? And I think in a lot of ways, yes, it is. And so we really want to take a look at our systems and ask ourselves how we can eliminate the bureaucracy of that, right? So I want to give a shout out to a faculty member. I was doing some transfer pathway review, communities of practice, and I had a faculty member come out point blank. This is exactly what he said to me. Tell me why I should care about transfer. And I feel like that's a hard question to hear when that's, kind of your life's work, right? But I think that this is a valid question that we need to answer for our system and for our students. Why should we care about transfer students? So I want to give a shout out to this faculty member and thank him for his stance and bringing this issue. So let's talk about why we should care about transfer students. Number one, I think this is like the reason. These are our students. Long gone. I mean, back before I even started working or even started in higher education, long gone are the days of high school students migrating to college or university and finishing, right? Like we all know who our students are, and the straight out of high school straight into university. I mean, you saw the students up here today. Like, our students are transfer students. And I'll talk a little bit more about the demographics of our students, but I would also say we kind of approach transfer from a deficit mindset, right? Like, we would love it if students showed up, they start here, they end here, we give them all the information that they need, but I think a lot of times when we talk about why do we care about transfer students, we approach it from, they don't have this class that I teach, or they have other responsibilities, right? Like, these students are generally, we heard, complicated students, right? But I think there's a beauty in that. There is some research that demonstrates that community college STEM transfer students are among the most motivated and resilient of all undergraduates. Like, that's a student you want in your class, right? Motivated, resilient. And I think we also have to look at, maybe they don't have that exact thing from that exact class, right? But they have a lot of other things that they've learned. They enrich your learning environment. Think about the students that we had up here this morning. These are students with rich backgrounds who would bring amazing backgrounds and information and discussion to your classes. So I think we have to think about transfer students in that way if we're thinking about what benefit to faculty are transfer students. I also, I said these are our students. So this is a little bit difficult to read, but these are our entering students from 2020 to 2022 cohort. So that blue graph there is our what we would call direct entry, started at the university students. That's only about half of our students, right? But when you consider that blue graph also includes PSEO students, you have to think, like, there are a lot of our students bringing in previous credits. Like, why should we care about transfer students? Like, these are the majority of our students, right? And the same thing with our two-year institutions. I think we focus a lot on, that traditional transfer pathway. I start at the community college, I finish at the university, right? Again, calling back to our students that we had this morning, those are not our transfer students, generally. Like, our students are going all over. So you'll see, this is a graph that shows one of these lines is transfer to our Minnesota institutions, and one of them is transfer out of our two-year institutions. So students are transferring into our two-year institutions as well. And when we're talking about Equity 2030 and the fact that transfer work is equity work, this is some data from the community college CCRC. You'll see this graph here shows direct entry, or shows students who are community college transfer students into the university. 31% of our Black students at our universities, and so this is Minnesota State specific public institution data, 31% of our Black students at our universities started at a community college. So I want to talk a little bit about the current transfer landscape. So this is some national transfer data. This is relatively recent. It was just released last February. So nationwide, about 33% of community college students transfer to a four-year institution. So keep this in mind. This is university data. Students started at the community college as a degree-seeking student, transferred to the university. This isn't completion. About 16% of our students that start at community college transfer to a university and finish in 6 years, right? So this is what we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation. So the next slide is Minnesota data. Spoiler alert, it's not great. In Minnesota, we're looking at about 28% of our community college students transfer, and only about 12% of our community college students graduate with a bachelor's degree in 6 years. So we got some work to do. And that's why I'm glad we're all here, right? Like, so we're all on the same page. We always hear transfer is broken. So let's think about how we fix this transfer problem. Yeah? No, so good question. So this is CCRC data. These are students who are degree-seeking students at the community college. And so that's nationwide. So it could be your AAS students, it could be your diploma students, it could be, or I don't think they have diploma and certificates. So it's associate's degree students like AAS, AS, AA degree students.
So this isn't reading that 80% of our students leave with nothing, correct? That's not how this reads?
No. So how this reads, and I like to compare it, so that 28% is students who transfer to the four-year institution. Now those students could have completed, there are lots of other students that could have completed a degree at the community college, and the limitation of these data is that we don't know how many of those students ever intended to transfer, right? Like perhaps that associate's degree was intended to be a final degree, but I think where this comes in is the fact that I don't think we have fewer students in Minnesota who intend to transfer, right? So like nationwide, it's at about a third. In Minnesota, we're at about 28%. So I don't know, like you said, I don't know how many of those students intended to transfer. All I know is that nationwide, our numbers are trending down, which is like kind of why I like to show that data. But yes, I would love to know how many of our students do intend to transfer. We don't really gather those data.
Knowing that we just identified that our type of student has changed, considering
Yeah.
we had adults who went back 2 or 3 times, do we have numbers past 6 years of completion?
Yes, so that is also a limitation of these data, is this is nationwide CCRC data, and they're defining success as completion at 6-year degrees. But we do know that we have plenty of students, again, as evidenced by the students on stage, that might complete later. And so I think maybe that's something that we need to look at as you know, how are we defining that? So I like to use these simply because we can kind of look and compare how we're doing. Like, people will say, well, what number should we be at? I think that this gives us some good idea of what we can aim for in kind of moving the needle. But yes, we have students who might take 20 years to complete, and how do we define that as success as a system?
Thank you.
All right, I've got just a couple more data slides. I don't want to bore you too much with too much data, but I would also like to say, so if we're looking at that 12% figure, that goes down to 9% for our low-income students and 10% for our Black students. But there are some bright spots in the data, and this is where I started to get a little excited. So you can go to the CCRC dashboard and manipulate this yourself. Maybe you want to compare this to institutional data. That would be great. So this is transfer and equity data, and I know it's very, very small. So I will tell you kind of the point of contact that I'm looking here. This is high school dual enrollment data. And so that top row you'll see, I think just by looking at it, you can see those are students who started at the community college who did not have dual enrollment as part of their kind of their package. They didn't take any dual enrollment in high school. That bottom graph is those exact same demographic of students who did take dual enrollment. And so for almost all, if not all of our Equity 2030 populations, that shoots up to 3 times the success of completing a bachelor's degree in 6 years if those students did dual enrollment. So for instance, for our Black students, it's about 10% completion of a bachelor's degree in 6 years. If they have done dual enrollment, that shoots up to 34% completion of a bachelor's degree within 6 years. So I think, there are bright spots out there. We just need to look for what are some of those best practices, and I would say encouraging dual enrollment, especially among our low income and students of color, can be hugely important for getting those students to complete. Yeah.
I love that we're having this discussion. Definitely, because there's always areas for improvement and areas of growth. Just kind of taking back, like stepping back into like a lot of our adult learners.
Yeah.
We don't have that typical student that starts off at the 2-year and goes right in and stays. A lot of times they start work and then they're working and then they come back. So taking into account those students that come back and transfer in to those 4-year institutions. An example of that would be Mayo Clinic's health system here in Mankato. They, with their accreditation, their 2-year RNs had a certain period of time that they needed to complete their 4-year. So we run into that employment need. So just taking into account that as well.
Yeah, and I think that we're kind of missing, like, transfer is so complicated in general, and then when you add in those adult learners, I think that, it's a question that we have to ask ourselves as a system, like how do we prioritize that, and what are some of those best practices for adult learners as well? All right, so now that I've bored you with data, I'm gonna
Thrilled them.
thrilled you with data. I'm gonna thrill you with my favorite subject, and that is course transfer. I have a little button that says I heart equivalencies. So if you don't heart equivalencies, you might not like this portion of the presentation as much. And for that, I kind of apologize, but not really. So course transfer is only one component of transfer, right? But it's the component that I'm focused most on right now, and I think if we can get this component right, we can really move on to some exciting transfer work in our system. All right, so I was asked to present this, so if this is information you already know, then you are my favorite people. If this is not information you know, then I'm about to blow your mind. All right, so do's and don'ts of course evaluation. So probably a lot of you have heard, and whether you agree with it or not, I know people will disagree with me, and to that I say I did not write policy and procedure, but I would love it if you would follow it. I know that this is not everybody's, people have lots of differing opinions, and I'd encourage you, if you have differing opinions about how we should be evaluating courses, send them to me. We'll get them to Policy Council. But up until that point, policy and procedure says that if a course is equivalent, if it is at least 75% similar by course learning outcomes. So you'll see there, some of the don'ts. I know that it's tempting to say that uses the same book or it doesn't use the same book. That is not in policy and procedure. That is not a consideration for equivalency. Some people will say, but I think this 5% of my course is really important. And to that I say, that is great. But maybe the student brought in some 5% from their other course that is also really enriching. We also, so 75% by course learning outcomes. We also, if it is a Minnesota State course, again, policy and procedure that has gone through the shared governance process, says if it is a Minnesota State course, the source of truth is the course learning outline. Do not ask for a syllabi. Now, if you are looking at the learning or at the course outline and it doesn't have the required information, let me know. I will reach out. We will get you the right course learning outcome. But Minnesota State policy says for Minnesota State courses, the learning outcome or the outline, course outline, is the source of truth. Learning outcomes 75% or more similar is an equivalent course. Now the exception to that, if you have some kind of specialized accreditation that requires that to be 100% similar, that's a different story. If it is the first course in a sequence and they need more information, like 90%, it needs to be 90% or more similar, that is an exception. But otherwise, this is transfer policy. This is what we should be using to evaluate courses. And I would also encourage you too, I get a lot of questions about can I contact, if somebody won't take my course in transfer, can I contact? That is in operating instruction. I encourage you to do that. If you need me to be there for that discussion, I am happy to, but we want faculty to have those discussions and to align as much as possible. All right, other considerations. I hear this a lot. So technical credits. I will start off by saying I am not a fan of the term technical credits. There is no definition. Everybody does them differently. If it was up to me, I'd get rid of the term. But it is not up to me, it is up to all of you. And so policy and procedure says you have to transfer in a minimum of 16 technical credits, however you define that. It does not say a maximum of 16 technical credits, you'll see. So if you want to transfer in 75 technical credits, please, 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 please do that. Give students credit for what they know. But it is a minimum of 16 technical credits. And you can set, if you want to set your minimum in your policy and procedure to 30 technical credits, 50, go ahead. But system level policy says 16. And these are all under 3.21 and 3.21.1, if you want some riveting policy reading. And students have the right to appeal. Encourage your students to appeal. Encourage them to have those skills of advocating for themselves, because a lot of times they will, even if you don't overturn the decision, students have that ability and you can make them see, like, this is why this decision was made. All right. PowerPoint suggested this, I think, because it's goal areas and it's a goal, but I kind of like it. Like, we're sending our courses, they're getting, they're hitting the goal, hopefully. So this is about transfer curriculum courses. So again, this may not be how you want to transfer in courses, but this is how system policy says it, is that MNTC courses transfer as the goal area at the sending institution. So that's one way that they transfer in. They also transfer as the completed goal area at the sending institution. So if that student started somewhere that has 2 courses in a goal 5, they go to an institution that has 3 courses in goal 5 and they've completed it, it's complete, no matter where they go. And then the same with the whole package of MNTC. So if they complete the MNTC somewhere, it's completed elsewhere. But one thing we'll talk about in a little bit, and I just want to give you an example as food for thought, is here is an example of an MNTC course. Interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is a Goal 2 course here in Mankato. It is a Goal 1 and 7A course at Riverland, and it is a Goal 1 course at South Central. So I want everybody in this room to think about, you've got the student in your office. How do you explain this to the student? Why they, if they took the course at MSU Mankato, they're coming into Riverland, they're wondering why their Goal 7 isn't complete. This is why. This is why we encourage standardization, right? Because I have tried to explain this in my career to many people, and I feel like I'm gone in the head trying to explain this, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So this is why we say, policy doesn't say that you have to align this, but gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could align this, right? Wouldn't that be great for students? So I just want to throw this out there. All right, so put it in the Gen Ed survey, right? Like, let's change this. Oh.
Just a quick question. So you were saying that we can't, if we were taking it from Riverland, we can't move that into Goal Area 1. That's the policy. Is this addressed in the Gen Ed proposal that you had earlier? So we'll still have this issue?
Well, it's not been discussed yet.
Yes, so there is, I think there is the feeling by some that goal areas are up to faculty and that it is academic freedom for faculty to decide which goal area they would like a course in. Now, perhaps if people were to respond in the general education survey and indicate if this is not something that you want to see in the future, I would encourage you to indicate that. Or if this is something that you want to continue, I would encourage you to put that in the Gen Ed survey, because I think this is something that will continue if we do not speak out about it.
So will there be some direction from the system office or from campuses that would help to shine a light on these kinds of issues in the curriculum? Because I think a lot of faculty don't know, right? Department chairs will know, faculty don't know, and so there's a version of this where it feels like it's heavy-handed, and there's a version of this that really helps us be student-forward, and would just appreciate some more guidance on the student-forward piece.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, my God.
There's another hand.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask a question, but first I like the bureaucratic violence description of transfer, and I'll use an example regarding everybody agrees that K-12 student preparation influences our work positively or negatively. At the same time, K-12 is having shortages, teacher shortages in critical areas like math, science, and so on, and special education. But transfer is the problem why they're having shortage because teacher training, Minnesota State trains majority of teachers in Minnesota. And we don't have an effective pathway for teachers who will get paid with a lot of education, $50,000, who will burn out. And we don't even have the decency to provide a seamless transfer pathway for our own self-interest. So we have these critically needed teachers, so they will provide students who are ready to us later on. So it's a self-destructive process. So it's not just about, it's a vicious cycle. So how, so we should have done this work yesterday, in my opinion.
Can I say something about that? One of the things that I would say about that is we have an opportunity as a system to, those things that are at the state level, certified, like teachers, nurses, those things, they all have to meet the board requirements at the state level. We have an opportunity in our system to have those programs align across. We would complete and finish way more nurses and teachers if we did that. As someone who advised a lot of those students in a place that didn't have a state institution for them to go to, so they would have to move to Winona or Mankato or wherever, it was really difficult to tell them what they should take at my institution because the requirements were very different for both of those things, even though it's a state accredited licensure. So I would recommend any of you who work in those areas to start that movement. It's not anything that we can do at the system level, that's an institution thing, but we have an opportunity. When Maine collapsed, that was an opportunity that wasn't seized on, and like you were saying, there's a lot of opportunity there that we haven't capitalized on, that we could really get students from some credit, no credential, people that are retraining into something else. They've always wanted to be a teacher, now they're going to do it. That's almost impossible if you've met with anybody that tried to do that. So there are ways for us to really get out of our own way and make those pathways more clear.
No? Okay. Just to touch base on the goal areas, those CCOs or course objectives are contracted. It's an agreement between faculty and administration. But there's also, faculty can't just choose goal areas for them to be in. They have to meet the 51%. So that's another thing too, if you're not aware of, so yeah, having a good deep look at that.
Got a question in the back.
There's two in the middle here.
Oh gosh,
Mike.
okay.
So I have a question. Can we go back a slide?
Yeah.
So who gets to pick this? Because I looked at the goals. Goal 1 is communication. So to me, it would make sense that an interpersonal communication class would automatically meet Goal 1. So who would get to choose? I can see how critical thinking would fit in this, but who would get to choose which goals match? Like which goals should go for which class?
Faculty. Who the faculty get it, and it goes through curriculum committee. And
I understand that, but I'm saying if we're trying to move towards common stuff and we want to try to get eventually those goals to align, which is what I picked up from you, who gets to pick?
So right now, it would be like we'd encourage faculty to collaborate. In the future with general education, I would assume it would still be faculty who would choose that, but I mean, that's right now, I would say we encourage the folks who teach interpersonal communication to perhaps get together and have these discussions. Or, if this is a priority of your institution is to try to align these things, I would encourage, administration, not like you don't have enough to do already, but to bring faculty together to have some of these conversations. Because this is just one example. Econ is another example. I didn't look at the 3 institutions present here today, but across the system is kind of a nightmare. So, I'd encourage this to be a priority perhaps of faculty, even if we don't align system-wide. We have 3 campuses in this room, like surely we could do that work together.
Thank you.
I wanted to address Abdi, and I completely agree that the work to address the teacher shortage in the state should have been done yesterday, 10 years ago. But I also want to acknowledge that that is something that we are currently working on to address at Minnesota State University Mankato by working intentionally with partners at South Central and Riverland, and working with the teacher apprenticeship program and special education, and with the addition of the online elementary education program. So a lot of things are happening to try and be more transfer friendly. And also we're currently working on moving the standards to the second half of a student's program so that it doesn't matter what they come in with during their first 2 years, they'll be able to finish everything within their second 2 years with us. So there is some work happening, but agree that it should have been happening a long time ago.
Yeah, and across all the universities.
Got another question over here.
Linda? If I fall in these things.
This is just a comment about the technical credits. I understand minimum of 16, but I do think there's a risk we would have in terms of if we accept it all, in a sense, because depending on what the students do with financial aid purposes, they can run into issues with that if they hit, the 150 max. So I think that's something that does need to be considered when working with students, especially since we have so many that qualify for financial aid.
You want to touch on it? I mean, so we've had this discussion across the system multiple times, and I guess, each institution is kind of their own mind about it. I think Kelly and Cassandra and I are all of the same mind that students should get credit for what they have, and if we run into max time frame, there are plenty of mechanisms in place for students to appeal that. So I guess I'll let Kelly correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that our position as as folks who've worked with students, and we acknowledge that other people have different positions, but we really think that students need to get credit for what they know, and if they have 50 technical credits, bring them in, right? Like, perhaps they won't use them all, but I think it's important for students to see those. There's something about seeing that credit too. Like, if I've completed 120 credits and you only give me 16, gosh, I'm gonna feel like I'm back at square one, right? Even though the 120 is maybe not gonna get them where they need to be. So, and we acknowledge there are different thoughts about that system-wide, but that's kind of where we're at, I think.
Yeah, and I would just add that the federal government knows how many credits have been taken by an individual, and that counts toward their lifetime allowance. And that's why there is a max time appeal. As someone who worked at a 2-year school, we did them all the time because people come in with bachelor's degrees, but they want to be a XYZ, which isn't covered by their bachelor degree. So it's really honoring the learning that they've had, explaining to them how different learning is different, and that they do have a lifetime amount that they could run out of, because a lot of times they don't know that either. I think that there's some financial aid literacy that is needed across the system, and that goes with Army and other military as well. Sometimes we were told not to bring their stuff in as quickly as we were because it impacted their thing, but the reality is the learning that they have is the learning that they have, and that's where we start from. The other thing is, if somebody doesn't have all their technical credits come in, but they have a lot of elective space, like really unclassified electives, just electives, that could have been filled with that but weren't brought in, that can be frustrating. And also someone might decide to get a Bachelor of Applied Science where a lot of those electives would apply to an award. So really knowing their choices of credential and things that can occur along the way is helpful. The other thing is that the 2-year schools, if you do a max time appeal, there should be a logic to why that's happening, and it's not just done automatically. We had a frequent flyer, as they sometimes are called, that wanted to have a max time appeal to get an AFA, which isn't much different than the AA they already had with a lot of art. So really having like some logic behind when you make those calls, and they're not random, and they're really based on some logic that goes with the financial aid rules.
I'd just like to get your perspective on one probably a unique situation for us. So I'm Sarah Cruz, I'm chair in computer information science. And one of the classes that frequently comes in from a variety of places, not just within Minnesota, is our introductory computing course that teaches the Office applications like Microsoft Word and so forth. And in our CS 100 course, it's half conceptual, where they spend time learning about just the breadth of the computing field. And then we have a lab component where they learn the Microsoft Office suite and some other application things. This particular course has a strong ethical component related to computing in it. So it sits inside of a gen ed category related to ethics. So when these courses come in, they may meet the majority of content, but if they don't cover ethics, I haven't been accepting the courses, because I feel if I put an equivalency in, then that's going to satisfy a gen ed that their course perhaps hasn't covered. So just maybe some reflection on that. I have started to try to keep track of where those are and intend to reach back out to institutions and say, hey, could you bring this in, and can we bring this into alignment? But just your perspective on that, because it might be something where it's perhaps even a 90% in terms of content, but if they haven't met that equivalency related to ethics, I don't feel comfortable bringing that course in as a gen ed and saying that they're apples to apples.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to like my answer. That course shouldn't be a gen ed course. Policy prohibits career courses like computer information courses from being general education courses. So I don't know how to answer that, because it shouldn't be a gen ed course, but I acknowledge that it has been a gen ed course. So I think maybe it warrants further discussion.
For an example like that, regardless of what the course is, if there is an equivalency, we have some examples later in one of my slides, where at one institution it's not given any gen ed, and at another institution it is, those goals should be rejected. So if you brought that in as an equivalent course, it can be equivalent, but not meet the gen ed. So one of the common ones that students that I worked with had was logic. A lot of schools will bring that as a math course, and others won't. So they went and they took a logic somewhere else where it wasn't given a goal for, and they bring it in, and I'm like, you get a 9. You know, they're a little upset, but that's how it is. And so it doesn't have to be something outside of policy like that course is, but just even within policy, there's going to be differences. And we're looking at equivalency, and then rejecting or accepting goal areas is part of that equivalency work.
That's a better answer. But also, those questions will be brought up with new gen ed. But I just do want to reiterate that, like, education courses aren't supposed to be part of gen ed. Health and wellness courses, nursing courses are all not supposed to be part of gen ed. So I'll just throw that out there.
We acknowledge that there can be content in non-foundational gen ed courses that are ethics and are things, and they should be there. But trying to give everything a gen ed tag is not useful really for students or for programs. One of the things I hope is that we will have a better way to identify the different needs for different courses. So foundational courses should just be like you do them and you're done, and then you get into the other stuff. So it should be giving you a really strong foundation for that continuum of work. But because we give it a tag and students can search for it, it's given outsized importance. And so we try to tag a lot of things so that it will be recognized. My hope is that we have a way for students to recognize a course that is an elective in a way that they don't have to search for a goal area, because foundational courses are not, supposed to be the most sought after courses.
I think I need more information about that, because this course is not allowed to be used in the major. So I think I need more information about what you decide is a career course versus other types of courses. So this is for non-degree seeking students. So perhaps something.
All right, so we're gonna get up and do a little activity in a little bit. So I just got a couple more things that I wanna cover. So I think one of the things we've kind of already talked about. So why are equivalencies important? Students are savvy consumers. Whether we like it or not, students view this as a very consumable interaction, right? So if I am a student and I apply in May and I'm told I'm not going to get a transfer evaluation until August, and then I go down the road and another institution is going to do it in 2 days, even if that's going to cost me $10,000 more, maybe I'm thinking about doing that because I'm going to get that answer right away, I'm going to get on with it, and I'm going to get going. So I just leave it out there that this is why I think equivalencies are important. It's something to think about. And like I said, our competition is doing it. When I was at Metro, I don't know if it's ethical or not, but our director of admissions had us do a secret shopper to our local privates, and all of them got back to us within 2 to 3 days with a full transfer evaluation, as well as exactly which courses I needed to take, and please sign up for a registration session in the next week. So it's just something, I acknowledge we do not have the staff and support to do that, but also we have to acknowledge that this is kind of our competition, right? And so how can we work to support students, even if we can't get them an evaluation in 2 days? And then we were actually just talking about this at lunch, so I appreciate this example. If you are constantly, I shouldn't say you, but if a person is constantly sending in a substitution, perhaps that should be an equivalency, right? Because every time you do that, your support staff has to go in, send you the substitution, right? You sign off on the substitution, it goes back to them, they substitute for that student. Do that 5 or 6 times a semester. Gosh, that's a lot of work for all of you, right? Relationship with it across the system, our students are using Transferology. So I like to just point this out as a practical application. When a student logs into Transferology, this is an example of what they see. So I loaded up our courses across the system for our computer science transfer pathway. So if I was a student, I loaded up my computer science courses, I go into Transferology, I've loaded them up, I press search for matches, I'm gonna get a screen like this. Now I shrunk this, but and I apologize, this is really university focused, but you can apply this to your colleges as well. When I go to search, Mankato shows up, I have to scroll through 3 pages before I come to Mankato for equivalencies. It's about 63%, I think. So you'll see all of those green highlights are other universities. There are 18 other universities that appear higher in the list. 3 of those are Minnesota State institutions. Now, I say this not to like shame anyone, like this is a fact, you're higher than several other institutions, but when we talk about students being savvy consumers, and also this eliminates some workload, right? If I'm a student and I'm curious, how can I transfer? What is gonna transfer into Mankato? I see this, either I'm like, oh gosh, okay, then I have to go and I have to talk to somebody. They have to look for courses. We have to go through all of this. Whereas if it just showed up here, I'm gonna feel pretty confident, right? Like if I'm looking for Mankato, I'll find it and I'll be like, ugh. But if you have more equivalencies, right, you're gonna show up at the top of the list. Those are already in the system. You don't need to look at those courses again. And students are gonna have a really good idea of how their courses are gonna transfer. They're gonna feel more confident in that process. So I acknowledge Transferology has a lot of warts. It's not the be-all, end-all, but this is a tool that students are using. And also, by doing equivalencies, you're going to have those done. You don't have to keep revisiting courses unless you really want to. So, last thing is transfer pathways. So, I know I thought we'd have so much time, and now, but if you have questions about transfer pathways, please let me know. They are designed as a 2+2, and the benefit to transfer agreements is that you don't have to create a new agreement for each college. So if a student starts out, you've got the package of social work courses, you develop a 3rd and 4th year map, so our college is all aligned, all the right courses, all the right learning outcomes based on what everybody agreed needed to happen, so like for social work. Students complete that. When they come in, you know exactly which courses students have, exactly which learning outcomes, and you've got a 3rd and 4th year map that's valid for those students. Our advisors at the community or at the colleges can look those up and help students know exactly which 3rd and 4th year courses they have to take. I would love to talk more about this, but I recognize that I've talked too much already. So does anybody have any other questions? Got a question over here?
So with course equivalencies, it's based on learning outcomes. Mm-hmm. Transfer pathways were created learning outcomes that needed to be met. So if the university or colleges have had changes and new courses meet the learning outcomes, can they be switched in the transfer pathway?
Yes.
And does that have to happen at the state level or at the college or university level?
So the templates are standard across all of our colleges, right? So if we were to make a change to the template, we'd have to make that, system level. That would be a whole process. If you have a new course that meets the learning outcomes, so I've noticed that for some institutions, what I would ask, and you don't have to do this, but otherwise you're going to have me knocking on your door asking for it, is that if you could upload a new crosswalk that shows how that course meets those learning outcomes. I have a folder that has all your crosswalks in it that I plan to give it to the university. So that's all I'd ask.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement, but it's would be lovely.
And I will share that transfer pathways aren't accepted across universities the same way. So everybody in this room, we're doing a great job, love it.
Yeah.
But I'll give biology on the social work pathway as an example. Our biology classes have changed over time. We have a new class that meets all of the learning outcomes, but the title of the course doesn't meet what's listed on the crosswalk. And so we've been told we cannot, even though the faculty are saying all of the learning outcomes match.
As long as we get a new crosswalk and it shows that those learning outcomes are met.
By Friday, it'll be in your inbox. Thank you.
All right, so the one last thing that I want to show you before we get into a little activity and get moving is there are two resources that I use every day in my work. So one of them is the transfer playbook, and I was so stoked when I came in this morning because we have been waiting for a new transfer playbook for years, and it was just released today. So transfer playbook, it is a free resource available online. It is developed from the CCRC. They do a whole nationwide study of best practices. Like, it is the guidebook. So check that out, brand new today. And then the Transfer Experience is a great book that's also based on data. We sent 2 to every institution a few years ago, so there might be one kicking around. It's also like $18. So I would also suggest Transfer Experience as a great book. We did a book club just a few years ago, system-wide, and it's phenomenal. So, all right, so we're gonna get you moving. Oh, and I should say curricular analytics. I didn't have this on here, but curricular analytics is something that I'd encourage folks to check out. This is great even not for transfer. It's a free software, so the price point is great. And it allows you to check the kind of the complication of your degree and show you pain points where students might have problems or stop out. There's also, you can pay for a workshop. It's not that expensive. Lots of tools there. So curricular analytics, phenomenal resource. All right. So we're going to do an activity. And if you're like me, you hate activities. But by now, you've listened to us so much. If you are able, get on your feet. And we're going to do a quick vote with your feet activity. All right? If you're not able, you can use your hands. Or if you're like, I'm just not going to stand up, don't make me, use your hands too. So, all right. So we're going to do a yes to the left. So you're going to move to your left. I'd make you move across the room, but I think that's too much to ask today.
No, that's our left.
Yeah. I had to twist and turn.
The clock is the middle.
Yeah. So if you think this is a yes, I want you to go to your left and no to the right. And if you don't know, you're going to be in the middle here, okay? So this is not for anybody to like check your work. This is just for you to kind of get moving. We've been sitting too long. So the first question is, I know the percentage of learners that begin at my college or university with previous learning, so that's credits of any kind, or where to find that information. Yes? No?
Yes? Repeat the question.
So it's that first one on there. I know the percentage of learners that began at my college or university with previous learning, or where to find that information. Some in the middle, some are saying yes. All right, so we got a mixed bag on this one. All right, so the next question is, students on my campus can find transfer options currently on the website. Yes? No?
There you go. Opportunity for steps.
Oh, ooh, I like that. Okay. I know where to find information on transfer policy and procedure. Yes? No. Policy and procedure. I know where to find it. Yes? I know where to find it. Oh, ooh, I love it. Okay. Next question. Students on my campus benefit from timely decisions, however you define that personally, from timely decisions about how their previous learning transfers and applies to their program. Yes. No.
How you define it.
How you define it. If you think it's timely enough. Yes, I think it's timely enough. No, I don't think it's timely enough. All right. We got a few dissenters. I like it. All right. Next question. New staff and faculty orientation at my campus includes transfer policies, practices, and technologies.
Oh, look at the migration.
Yes. No.
Wow. Sad face.
All right. Next question is, my campus communicates to students about transfer policies, practices, and technologies. Yes. My campus communicates to students about transfer policies, practices, and technologies. Yes or no?
Just communicate.
If you think that you effectively communicate about transfer policies, practices, and technologies, yes, no.
I think they know where they have work to do.
Yeah. And the last question, I know that my campus website provides clear information on how to be awarded credit for previous learning or where to ask questions. So this would be like CPL information. You have it on your website, you don't have it on your website. All right, thank you for participating. That is all I got. I'll hand you back over to Kelly. Hopefully we got a little renewed energy.
So it looks like you guys know where you might have some work that you want to work on based on where you ended up with your feet there. So now back to the historical thing. We're talking about reimagining and reconnecting. So while we were on the trajectory of uniqueness, individualization, we're hearing a lot of people coming back to alignment, coordination, collaboration, which is one of the themes of this conference, and changes over time. So since about 2020, so it coincided with the pandemic and a whole bunch of other things that happened, people are like, we could do things more like a system. And we've heard from students at petition levels and things like that, I thought you were a system, why did this not do this? So students look at us like a system first, and at a campus second. But I think a lot of our institutions look at us as a campus first and a system second. So if we center the learner, it changes how we look at our programs, at our courses, and at the statistics that we gather and what we want to do. So really centering the student helps us refocus on that interconnectedness and leveraging our system. Being a system is really advantageous if we do it in that way. I was at a national conference during the pandemic, and I was with this consortium of people at a state that doesn't have a system. They were from all different places, publics, privates, whatever, and they had a consortium and they would align programs and courses. And I said, so what do you think would work better? Because they were complaining about how they weren't aligned, and they were so much more aligned than we were. So I was like, what do you think would work better? And they said, if we were a system. And I was like, oh, okay, kind of walking back into the shrubs, But really what they had was trust in each other and a consortium and an understanding that they're all higher ed, and that their goal was to get people who live in their state, who are learners and want to get credentialed, to do that. And so they coordinated and collaborated and saw, what are we doing that's getting in the way? What could we do differently that would get out of our way? And they saw it as everyone's work. And so part of this thing that you all put together is that. You have people, a lot of times you'll see us siloed. So faculty talk to faculty, advisors talk to advisors, registrars talk to registrars. You're all talking to each other. And I had this graph that I did when I was implementing Planner and Schedule Builder that showed that it comes from the Curriculum Development Committee. It goes to the encoder, that's the program. It gets built in the catalog and the website. Then it should come down to the student and the advisor and go back up there, so that there's a loop. All the people that touch programs, all the people that touch courses, registration, you should be talking regularly. Where are those gaps? Not everybody knows how to use e-services or define equivalencies. We all should know it's there, but we don't have to know the intricacies of it. So one of the things that I noticed in conversations today, nobody talked about technology, yet we all depend on people knowing our technologies to navigate our systems. So that's e-services, that's UAchieve, that's anything else that you have just at your institution. So you might have a CRM at Mankato that you don't have at Riverland or South Central. So really being aware of the samenesses and the differences, and so that we can leverage those things that are enterprise-wide. The consolidation went from 37 independent, which is how we described ourselves, to when Devinder was here, he called it interdependent colleges and universities. And we're very interdependent. One of the things that we do well is we see each other as peers in higher ed. We educate more people in the state of Minnesota than anybody else. And we have pride in our teaching because people are here for the students, which is a little bit different than some other things. Recognition that policy and technologies alone have not and cannot fix transfer. So that was said at the very beginning of Minnesota State. Well, we don't really have to align things, because by that time, IBM computers, that's really what it said in there, it's kind of funny. IBM computers will be able to just do that. Now you're hearing similar things about AI. It really takes people. Like, we could make this all happen automatically now, but we're separately accredited institutions for a reason. That gives us autonomy to not allow, but it also gives us autonomy to allow. We can coordinate as much as we want. There's nothing making us not do that, except for our own selves. Boom. So today, in the groups that I talk to, there's renewed interest all across Minnesota State. Faculty groups, administrator groups, anybody, to really look at standardization and alignment. For those things that are the same, they're the same. For those things that are unique to my institution, I want that to stand out. Is that a composition, freshman composition, expository composition essay course? Probably not, because that's offered everywhere. That starts in high school. But what are some things that are unique to Mankato? Let's spotlight those. What are the things that are unique at Riverland and at South Central? Let's spotlight those. And the things that can be gotten everywhere, those can be gotten everywhere. And they're really strong and they're really foundational because the faculty are there because they love to teach that subject. And they're the people that really know a lot about that subject, so they can geek out on it. Let's focus on that creativity, on really getting the learners excited about the learning and not about the nuts and the bolts, which is what I call what I do. All right. So we continue to strive to break down silos. This is one of the things that we're doing at the system office too. So just like on campuses, there's departments and divisions. That's at the system office too. But Cassandra, myself, and Jessica, we all came from a campus. And we all worked amongst people. So when we got system office, we're like, hey, why aren't we meeting with them? Why aren't we meeting with them? Why aren't we? So that's happening. And I wouldn't say it's just because of us, but it's because more and more it's seen that this is everybody's work, and unless we understand it from your view and from your view, it's really hard to get things done and a little bit easier to not agree or feel like stuck in your own spot. Minnesota State Student Planner is the technology that I support, and Minnesota State Guided Learning Pathways is the framework that was put up as part of Equity 2030. So the pillars are the different things on Minnesota State Guided Learning Pathways. This is on minstate.edu, as well as ASA Connect, and it's linked here once you get the slides. That's the structure for it, and there's a lot of information about how you do that within programs and in faculty, but there's less information about what does that mean for advising, what does it mean for students. So I tried to put that together with the Minnesota State Student Planner. The planner is a tool that students and advisors and employees who have the security can look at, and before students register, after they get grades, they should be running that. So if your students don't know where this is, please help them find where that is. I put bookmarks on everybody's table. There's a QR code. We have lots of marketing materials that are part of the slideshow that you can get. Once students start using it, it really gives them agency. They can be in charge of their own education. And when they come to advising or when they come and talk to faculty, they have deeper questions. They're not talking about how do I make toast. They're like, okay, I made toast this way, but if I went with French bread, would it be better? Or should I take Italian? You know, I like analogies. That was a new one. All right, so if we put these side by side, Minnesota State Student Planner is the tool that helps us implement graduation guided learning pathways, which is the framework. So the degree audit is the thing that shows them what their chosen program is. However, we heard students changing their majors all the time. Our audit allows them to do a what if major. That's another reason why we really encourage people to bring in all the credits. Because if I said I wanted to do a business major, it was just because I talked to my cousin and he said, yeah, just do that. That's a real thing that happened when I was advising. I changed my major to business because my cousin told me HVAC is hard. My background is career counseling. It's a little sad, but that's how people make decisions. So one of the things we want to have students talk about is what are their goals. If they have their degree audit and it's up to date, they can see what they have done, what they have left, and what they have yet to complete. So Graduation Planner allows them to take those courses from the degree audit and stick them within a term-by-term plan, and then Schedule Builder allows them to create and optimize a schedule. That all aligns with the things on the guided learning pathway as well. I'm trying to go fast because we're running out of time here. This just shows the way that advisors would use the e-services for students. So it's a big circle. You go into e-services, that's where students access degree audit. Some people are like, can't that link be somewhere else? Well, they're gonna have to register, so we really wanted it to be there. It has to be somewhere. That's where it is. There's also guides that are linked right there. So if a student goes into their e-services, goes to degree audit, opens up Planner, creates a plan, that's always talking to UAchieve, so they're getting the most up-to-date information every time they run their audit. So if they took a course somewhere else and you haven't brought that in yet, they won't know that, but maybe they will, and you can do that. And then Planner goes to Schedule Builder goes to e-services, and then they can register if it's their time to register. We also included in your packets some, what are they called? At-a-glance guides for each of those tools, and I encourage you to print those out and leave them in for students. There's some on the back, but each individually out I think would be helpful. And then they can see just in a one-page thing how they could use those tools. Sorry, I need a drink. So earlier this year in January, I looked at the numbers for students with plans. And it's a really rough statistics. It's just students with plans. I took out test students, things with my initials, things like that. But otherwise, it's just students. I don't know if they're current students because students can be current or past or not registered and still have access to the UAchieve product. But students affiliated with Minnesota State University Mankato, about 29% had a plan. Riverland Community College, 79% had a plan. And South Central, about 38% had a plan. Those have all gone up. I ran the numbers yesterday, but I didn't update this thing yet, but it's on our site if you wanted to know. There's better information that you could use. We have some reports and queries that you could use if you wanted to do this. But I will say that this region, so if you take the state of Minnesota, and you look at a university and you collect the colleges around it, this region has the most plans per student of any of them. So everybody in this region has at least 20 or higher. I consider 20% of the students with plans to be a high number. And you all have that. So good job. When we look at our ecosystem, so this is our current UAchieve test transferology ecosystem. These are all college source products, and we've had them since 2003, remember. So we have a lot of data in here. If you want to know how many transfer records there are, talk to your transfer office. They could probably tell you, but it's in the thousands, some are in the millions. It's a lot of information. And it's not just Minnesota State schools that we're making equivalencies, it's everywhere. So this is really the tools that students need to use because it's the most up-to-date that they have. And the more that they get to know about how to use them, they can use them everywhere. These tools are available at all 33 colleges and universities. Metro State just did a project, and they took some data, and they created a D2L class for their business students, and they had them take this course that talked about how to use tools and how to do different things. And they found that students who have at least, let's see, 30 to 60 credits already done complete at a higher rate than students that don't. So those are transfer students, because Metro has a lot of transfer students. They also said that students that were coming in had already created a plan because they had attended another Minnesota State school that showed them how to use it. And then they said thank you to everybody who's doing that. So you're not teaching every student. You've heard a lot from advisors saying they need more help. Everybody can show students where this is and just let them use it. It's really intuitive. It doesn't do everything you want to do. It's not going to, fry bread for you. It's not going to tell you you can't take that class. It's a really smart Word document that gives you a lot of information, but it doesn't give you all the information. So it's a good starting point for that advising conversation, that faculty conversation of what you do next. It also talks to transferology. So if instead of calling it transferology, call it your transfer portal. So if you're a student, sorry, I can't mute this very well. If you're a student at Riverland, and you know you're going to go to Mankato, what you can do is you can create your term-by-term plan in UAchieve. You can put all that in transferology because you're not a student yet at Mankato, and you can see how those courses transfer. We also have a partnership application program which connects the Riverland to Mankato before they apply, and then they could have those courses in there if that's what you wanted to do. By having the person be in between, Abby, you're the person, right? That's going to be really helpful because you can kind of, what?
At what point does a student gain access to the SEC student? At what point can they log in and run an audit
Where did I put my iPad over here? At the moment, they have affiliation.
which is their application?
No. They could register for a course, drop the course, they have affiliation.
Did everybody hear that question? No.
So I had asked at what point a student can access an audit for their next institution. So the example being they're a current SEC student who plans to go to MSU, and that's been one of our issues. And the answer was a workaround that I just learned about. Do you want to say it?
So in order to get affiliation with another institution, all you have to do is register for a course and then drop the course and you have affiliation with that school. That's how visiting student status happens. What won't happen is those South Central courses won't be in your record because that has to be done by then. But if the practice is, I know the student is coming from here to here, you could run those prospective student classes in there. The intermediary between that is transferology. So if you don't want to use the actual tool, use transferology, because transferology will take those South Central courses, put them in the program, and show you how it does. You can't shut down requirements like you can in the audit, but if you're just showing, hey, this is the 2+2, these will be done, these won't, and that's why having some transfer guides is really helpful as well. But transferology is very powerful. It's not just giving you course-by-course equivalencies, it's showing you how your courses from another place will complete requirements at that place. It can also show you which courses from South Central that you haven't taken you might be able to take because it'll show you those equivalencies as well. You can also use that as an advising tool and an admissions tool, and the student can send it for financial aid information. You can use that for gathering prospects. I think that's a very underutilized way that we use transferology currently. So how complicated can it be? We have all these things connected and everybody says they're equivalent and all this stuff is there, right? Okay, this is just one example. We're not going to go into the answers, but imagine, these are real classes at your institutions. You're probably familiar with them. As someone who advised a lot of nursing students, this was one of the classes that I'm like, can't we just? So you'll see there's some standalone human anatomy, human physiology, and then there's A&P1 and A&P2. And sometimes the systems and things covered in A&P1 are different at one place, and they're more like the A&P2. So you can't assume anything from a title, but we're gonna today. So based on the title, A&P1 is A&P1, A&P2 is A&P2, human anatomy is human anatomy. But you see there's differences. So none of the courses, if you took them at Minnesota State Mankato, would give you a goal. But they would if you took them at Riverland and South Central. So just think about those things. And then if you took a course at South Central and you transferred it to Riverland, goal 2 doesn't happen. So there's lots of ways to do this. And we have many-to-many and one-to-one relationships. Your transfer encoder could tell you all about the joys of transfer. But those are the kinds of things that are confusing for students because they have very much similarities, but they end up with different things. So imagine a student who took a course, anatomy and physiology, college level at their high school to finish their high school requirements, and that course didn't have a goal area. But when they got to their institution where they planned to do a biology major, they needed either to be an upper division, or they needed to be a goal 3, or they needed to be something that it wasn't. Those are the things that we were talking about in one of our groups that you really need to look at P20 and what's happening there, because that's where those classes are coming from. And scenarios, oh, look at that, we have 3 minutes. Do you want to do them? Yeah. Okay.
Do the second one.
I'll let you do those. You want to do them?
Well, we have 3 scenarios, so we'll I guess it's our last thing before you go to your next. You've got a few minutes. So here's a scenario of a student who completed a transfer pathway. So at your table, we're asking you to look at this. So it says at a Minnesota State a student at a Minnesota State 2-year transferred to a 4-year university. Transfer wasn't what they thought it would be, and think some courses should have been equivalent. Their transition was not smooth, and they didn't have any in-person orientation. Sound familiar? But they feel disconnected from other students. We developed this months ago, so that was just a. So at your table, quickly discuss for like maybe the next 2 minutes, what kind of questions would you ask the student? How would you help the student meet their goals and questions? How would you know about the student's issues? And are there any other considerations? And what would your recommendation be? So we'll leave you with this for the next couple minutes.
How would you know someone that sticks out? To the point made in our session earlier was, you only know from those who advocate for themselves or have a helicopter parent, spouse, username, and we don't know otherwise. We just don't know.
Do we have MavConnect? It's a starfish navigate.
Right.
Do you guys have anything like that?
So we have a Visa watermark.
Oh,
It's not to the level of what either EAB or Starfish or those others do, but
not that it's. I'm not saying no, but it's one thing they're trying to do a good job with. And this year I taught undergrad, or this term I taught 2 undergrad courses, and they did a good job reaching out to me, saying, "Yep." But again, it doesn't really get at the things. It doesn't quite get there. Yeah. No, that's right. Happens a lot.
now maybe when Chris Lovestick is doing a transcript, maybe he sees something. But that's really like his issue.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting. How would we know? Hopefully they college, they have somebody they can ask the question to or that they're working with to help them.
It is a good
Kind of funny how in life it's like student versus
I know, perfectly. Oh my gosh. I'm going to, Judy, I'm gonna, I got the candy out and stuff. Go ahead and let people take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there less?
Yeah. And then if people want some more, they can come back, but that way they can just come back.
Yeah, it's easier to
All right, I know that that was probably not nearly enough time to discuss this, but we have several of these scenarios. If you ever want to use them, this is in the slideshow. There's another one for credit for prior learning, and there's one for veteran students. I also want to give a little plug. There's a group of us at the system office that have been working on student personas, and we've developed several student personas as well. So if we have a ton of resources, if you want to use an activity like this on your campus, let me know and I can send you all those resources. And then Kelly has a couple things to tell you, and then we'll send you off.
There are a lot more guides on here, or a lot more slides. You guys will have them. But one thing I wanted to touch on was we do have this slide that can help students know about it. So this time of registration is a good time to have this up on your banner on your website, or if you have screens in your hallways, students can scan the QR code and find their way through that. But I really wanted to touch on transferology and campus landing pages. So as you see, there's 4 different versions here. There are 14 out of 33 institutions that have a branded landing page and are using their referral link. So that the page that Jessica showed you, that's not using your referral link and not using your branded page. The benefit of using a referral link is that your institution will be at the top regardless. The other thing that will happen is they'll see that it's yours. So I don't even remember who I put on here, but I think it's Winona and Moorhead, Normandale, and Southeast. So get an idea of what's going on there. We contacted everybody from institutions. I did like a little tiny audit just to see if your links were right and if you had a landing page, and just let you know. The other thing that you can do if you have this is that you'll get statistics. So how many students' accounts were created using this link. And you can really see, so Winona didn't use it, and then they did, and it went way up. So you can really get an idea of how many students are using this. We have whoever on your campus has a transferology administrator can get monthly statistics of matches that are happening, how it's being used. There's a lot of information in transferology. You can see also what are most people asking for that there isn't an equivalency for, so you can use it to strategize and put some of those things to the top of your list that maybe you didn't know were important to know about. And so there's a lot of ways that you can use all the tools that we have to prioritize your equivalency creation. And there's a state landing page. And then if you wanted to subscribe to one thing and get most of the information we talked about today, it would be the ASA newsletter. And I think this has an automatic forwarder. But it is really a good one. You get one email address, you get lots of things, and you can make some of them go away, but you're going to be in touch with what's happening at the system level, and so not be out of some of those loops that happen. Do we want to have questions or anything? We're good? Thank you.
So let's hear it for these two. I'm not sure that you could have talked any faster. I know. So what I want to tell you all is that tomorrow you'll receive an email either from myself or Mai Chung Lee. It'll include a link to these PowerPoint slides. But tomorrow, okay? Thank you. All right, so the next thing, let me just get this. Golly, I don't know why I cannot figure this out. Am I going the wrong way? No. No, you're going the right way. Okay, I'm just about there, everyone. So this is our next breakout session, and we went ahead and the water and the granola bars and the Transfer Sweet chocolate bar. Transfer is sweet, collaborating for transfer student success. Thank you, Mike Bilden. Fancy. Yes, yes, sir. So we got it out now. We were going to just leave it till the very end, but I think we need some chocolate. And so as you go to your next session, please feel free to grab some things there for yourself. Okay, so also folks, if you could please take all your stuff out of this room, because we do have a session here, a 3 to 4 o'clock session here, which will include these groups, okay? Everybody get it? And then when you're done with your session at 4, if you want to come back and get another water or granola bar or chocolate, feel free to do that too. But we just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. After this session, I said, please return, but you don't have to. Please watch your email. In the next couple of weeks from me, you will be getting an evaluation, and we want to hear from you because we have another one to put on next year, and Shauna's going to be looking for some guidance on that. And so we really want to hear from you, okay? And then you'll also be getting access to the recordings and the notes and all of that. So with that, everybody, please go ahead, move to your next session. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and have a great 3 to 4 o'clock session.
We don't have discovery. They can just pick them.
Right, but do we have the faculty have access to that? I tried to do that.
You do if you get security.
Okay.
So if you don't have UC underscore UAchieve, if you look in your security administration, if you have UC underscore UAchieve and you have access to certain students, do you have an advising load?
Yeah.
You should be able to see those, and you should be able to see yours.
Indeed, you should. All right.
So if you go into employee home, and on the bottom if it says UAchieve, then you have it. If it's not there, you don't. In the faculty app, up in the right left-hand corner is that, and on the right is the just degree audit that you can run. That's not access to the online one. But if you,
I mean, right now
you
I
could
go
look
through
at
my
yours as a
service,
student.
No, but what I want to do is
Look at a student.
Yeah. Just earlier this week, I had this exact example. I had a student who says, "You know what? I don't think I'm going to make it through the biotech program. I want to just go to the general biology." And I said, "Well, let's take a look." And it's like, "Well, I can't change that."
Yeah, he can. He could go in and pick that, and then you want him to change the major if it works for him.
Yeah. Let's say so. It would have been nice if I could have done it.
Yeah, you can just submit it. I don't know who does your security on your campus, but you go through the security administration request, and you just select UC underscore UAchieve, and then it will route to them, and they'll award it to you if you have a load, an advising
Who
load.
we would talk to if we just make that automatic.
No, because of the way that security is set up in our system. I mean,
Right,
unless
but
that
all of our
person and your
faculty-
faculty have the agreement.
Well, everybody on our faculty has access to the DARS report.
Yeah, that's different. Because that's only for your course list.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Well, who your advisors are. You can't see all students.
No, but it's
Right.
it's for my advisee list. I
Correct.
can see everybody, but I should be able to do that with all my advisees.
Correct.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
I think it just never has been, people haven't wanted it, but yeah, if you have an advisee list,
yeah.
and it will be restricted to that if you use if you use ISRS.
Right. Yeah. Same way that ours is. I can only get DARS reports for my advisee.
Correct. It's just a separate security.
41 days, I maybe won't care after.
I can show you where it is.
I thought I told everybody. Yeah. I'm feeling short right now.
We are very
Oh, what you're talking about was I was saying, to me, it makes a lot of sense if faculty could do that for all the advisors. Right, but I.